Morning Chelsea fans, welcome back to another week of Chelsea Chat with me, Moose and JB. This week we're going to go through the Leicester game, walk you through sort of our thoughts on that performance, then straight into Luton, and then look at sort of the Lampard conundrum. What's going wrong, how can he improve, what we think the right sort of course of action is, and then looking forward to the Wolves and then the Burnley game. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell notification. We'd love to hear your thoughts below. Get sort of your thoughts as to how Chelsea are going to fare by the end of the season and any improvements you think we should have. So JB, it's not a great time to be a Chelsea fan at the moment. We were just talking, it has such a big effect. I think the whole concept of lockdown, people are watching football so much at the moment, and compared to sort of 2 months ago where we were on sort of cloud nine, looking sort of positive and sort of second place. It's not a pretty place to be, is it?
No, it certainly feels like a lot longer than a month, doesn't it? You think like it was mid-December we went top of the league with a win over Leeds, and now we're ninth, facing imminent doom by the feel of it. But yeah, I think you're right. You know, like the fact that everyone's in lockdown and most people are, you know, not leaving their homes on a day-to-day basis, and you kind of, football is a big part of what's keeping a lot of, you know, people going. And then when you're a Chelsea fan, it just feels like it's just even worse. It just piles on the misery on top of it. But you know, I do think it will come right eventually. I don't think this will last too much longer. We've got a good run of fixtures coming up after the Wolves game. So yeah, I mean, there's reasons to kind of feel positive, and in any way you want. We've won 3 of our last 4 games, so tell me that's bad form.
We'll touch a little bit around where our thoughts are, where we think it's going wrong, and what's going on a bit later. But let's kick off with the Leicester game. Probably not to sort of kick the whole podcast off on a negative note, but it probably just exasperates everything that's going on at the moment. Sort of, we were not good, and our performance wasn't good. The team sort of morale was not good. What were your thoughts on the game?
It was horrible to watch, to be honest. I think I think the players, once we conceded that first goal, I mean, they took a little while to kind of recover from that. You could see that their confidence had kind of been shot once again. I think, you know, a lot of them have quite a weak mentality in that sense. The second we concede a goal, they just drop. But the positive of that was they did seem to kind of pick it up a little bit as time went on in that first half. And we kind of grew into the game a bit more. Things were looking a little bit up. And then we had that penalty awarded, which was just outside the box, so ended up not being given. And then they go straight down the other end. We switch off completely, still thinking about that almost penalty. And Reece James' mistake, unfortunately, allows them through, and James Maddison gets a goal, and that just killed it. I think, you know, we played right into Leicester's hands that game, and second half, it was probably one of the most comfortable victories I've seen in the Premier League for quite a long time. Especially, you know, Chelsea game, it was painful. I mean, you know, we had a couple of chances, we had a couple of marginal decisions go against us, which were fair. Not saying they were unfair, but you know, like as I said, the penalty which wasn't given because it was outside the box, and then Werner scored towards the end offside, very marginal. So it's that's the Premier League, though, isn't it? It's just about those fine margins, and things can swing your way. If that penalty was, you know, a few millimeters further forward, if Werner was a few millimeters further back, we could have scored 2 goals in that game, and it could have been a completely different story. And you're looking at after that thinking, right, we're on the up now. We've won, you know, a couple of our last games. We've beaten a big rival in terms of the top half of the table. and that would just be a complete different mentality. But because those two things didn't go in our favour, we're now looking at ultimate doom and Lampard's, job on the line. And it's just how it goes when you're in this kind of form. And it can feel very demoralising as a fan, and it's difficult to take, especially when you can see that you've got quality there just waiting to be brought to the fore, and it's just a waiting game, and it's painful to sit on it and just wait for that to click into place.
I think sort of there's a few things in that game. Sort of defensively, we just still don't seem quite right. Reece James obviously wasn't fit enough for the game, but I think sort of the quality we have on the bench in certain position forces Lampard's hand to start players like James. And then equally what he offers is completely different. Sort of, I think sort of what we've seen over the last month when we've seen sort of injuries, sort of with James and Chilwell dropping out for one or two games here and there. Our wing backs are sort of our lifeblood of providing sort of assists and goals at the moment. Is their sort of crossing is what we miss. Relying solely on a Werner and a Ziyech or Pulisic when they're fit doesn't give us the sort of options in the middle or the crosses into the middle that we need. So it sort of forced Lampard's hand because he wants to play that mentality. Don't get me wrong, Silva has been sort of a breath of fresh air since sort of signing of the season personally, but we rely so much on a 36-year-old to go and try and win our league. We should have a secondary sort of defensive player who can really hold their own, and equally we shouldn't have to play Thiago Silva every game. But I don't see sort of Zuma has been a breath of fresh air this season. I think he's stepped up to play with Silva, but he's equally very immature still. I don't think quite at that standard yet, but he's getting there. So it's not like it's doom and gloom in that position. But I don't really trust Rudiger. There's still something there that's not quite right.
I really can't understand why he's dropped Zuma and brought in Rudiger for kind of what you would say is like the most important games almost. He seems to have lost some faith in Zuma recently, and it's quite disappointing because I didn't see enough bad performances from him to think he should be dropped. And in the same sense, I've not seen enough positive performance from Rudiger to say that he should be in there instead of Zuma. So I think, there is still some questionable decisions, especially in that back line. But
I think it's just a complete lack of faith, if I'm going to be honest. Sort of Christensen, I wouldn't trust. No. I'm gutted to see Tomori go to sort of AC Milan, equally because there's a buy-in clause there, which means that potentially we lose him if he has a sort of a good enough run of games.
It's only £25 million as well for someone that could be a very good defender. That's not really a good deal. I don't think. I'm not really happy with that. I don't think.
I would have been happy him going out on loan for the rest of the season. I just don't like the idea of losing another player because I could see him becoming a real mainstay in our defence. If you look at the performances that he had last season, he was brilliant. It just wasn't sort of the flavour of the month to start this year. And I don't know if there is sort of a lack of form or anything like that, but just doesn't be able to sort of get a position. But I don't think that negates a lot of the stuff that he did last year. I just think there's still this sort of the huge bit at the moment, and we'll touch on it in a bit, but I think sort of the solace I get from seeing these sorts of games is I've seen United have the same drop in form. I've seen Arsenal have the same drop in form, and it's only temporary. It's not as if sort of they've been able to sort of turn around one or two games and all is forgiven. And I feel that's going to be the same with Lampard. He just needs a few 2-3 wins under the belt and sort of he'll build his confidence. My big worry is just the confidence drop in a few players. So Havertz starting the season, you're never expecting all players that you spend a lot of money on to hit the ground running. Sort of, you'll see a lot of opposition fans go, "Oh, if you spent 200 million, you expect performances," but that never happens. And sort of, I'd love to see one team buy a number of players and integrate them well. It just doesn't happen.
Especially young players from other leagues as well. It's not the same as, you could go out and buy the best 11 players in the Premier League and you could probably get them to win the league the following season. It's not really the same when you're going out and buying very young players that are from other leagues that have never played Premier League football before. It's a very different kind of situation. And, not everyone is Bruno Fernandes, who comes in and hits the ground running straight away and just slots into the team like he was always there. You're not always going to get that. Players kind of change and mold to the surroundings at a different pace. And it just happens that the ones that we brought in seem to be quite slow at their transition.
Well, you think around it, sort of for every Bruno Fernandes that United have had, they've had a Fred, they've had that Van der Beek, they've had a number of other players. They're just sort of the performances of one or two standout players make a difference. Yep. I think sort of Leicester game, it was just frustrating. First goal was complete fluke. And Ndidi is not a goal scoring sort of player. Fluffed the shot after another player missed the shot himself, went in, and it just we just dropped our confidence and we didn't improve from them. Really gutting, because I think sort of, as you say, a few sort of different changes, we would have we could have been back into it. Everything would have sort of pressure off from Lampard. We've still got to go. And there's, as much as we've got a nice run of form, the big games, like to sort of moving on to the Luton game, where we would have typically rested a number of players and brought in a huge amount of youth. We're now starting Werner, we're starting a number of first-team players because we are not confident they've got the form or the fitness to continue playing Premier League. So we've now got an even tired squad to just try and improve that run of form. And as you say, it has given us 3 wins in 4 games. But personally, it's easy wins, the 3 that we've had. If we'd lost to Morecambe and lost to Luton, I think sort of we wouldn't be here talking around podcasts as to sort of how Lampard turns it round. It would be who's next. But I think there's a lot to sort of be said. I mean, the Luton game today, if we move on from Leicester, absolutely poor performance. But Luton game today, there was a number of things that were brilliant about the game. And I think let's focus on the positives there. Tammy Abraham, absolutely great performance, I thought, for quite a lot of the game. Werner played well. Billy Gilmore played well. There was lots to sort of be confident around that performance. You're never going to get an easy game, no matter who you play. But it did sort of seem like a relatively straightforward win for us. Tammy obviously got 3 good goals. Always nice to get a hat-trick. I think you'll see him start a few more games, just based on that performance. But there was a few things that really got under my skin a little bit. Let's start with every Chelsea fan's just frustration, and it's sort of the goalkeeper of the year, Kepa. I don't know what was going through his head in that point. I mean,
it was such a feeble attempt to make a save. I mean, he made a couple of good saves second half. I know obviously he conceded that really weak chance, but he I wouldn't say made up for it, but it was when the game was 2-1. So, if he did his usual Kepa stuff, then we would have been looking at a 2-2 comeback and even worse, So he did make a couple of good saves. It was that one error, but it's another error on top of all the others. And now every time he plays, we're just waiting for the mistake. We're waiting for that goal that he gifts to the opposition.
Every other player, I think it's a Karius moment, where sort of Liverpool now, no matter if Karius turns around and has an exceptional run of form, as soon as he goes back in goal for Liverpool, every opposition player is waiting for that one mistake in him.
Yeah, shoot on sight, isn't it? Just
because and it's the worst thing for a goalkeeper, because not only is your confidence dropped, people are aware that they can score against you. Whereas if you look at goalkeepers in form, like an Alisson or an Edison, they're like, you're almost unstoppable. I remember for years, Neuer was almost sort of, you could take as many shots as you want and you just knew that Neuer was going to score. That position is 100% around confidence, and he doesn't have it. I mean, we're talking around good run of form, a couple of good saves. There's nothing I wouldn't expect a sort of average keeper to make.
Yeah.
I think we big up sort of his good moments because we just
That's so surprising.
and I just think it's sort of how often can you now sort of keep him as second choice goalkeeper? I personally would.
What we need to keep him as a training goalkeeper and just get Werner to just pepper shots at him just to get his confidence up.
Because knock his confidence into the ground by scoring more against him.
Yeah, but then Werner's going to get his confidence up, and I think that's a bit more important, isn't it?
The worst thing is Werner goes, anyone here could score against him. Let's go and get Willie Calabero. Sort of firing a 50-yard sort of super strike. Kepa just let it go through his hands.
Petr Cech, that's the one he wants to get training up against.
I think him as a second choice at the moment. It's just, but we can't. Well, the thing is, sort of as Chelsea fans, we can't sort of keep fooling ourselves. If it happens every single time, why are we any sort of indifferent that it was going to happen today? Frustrating around Werner because, as you sort of said earlier in the podcast, had an exceptional game. And when I say exceptional, he just seems to be building a little bit of confidence. Just frustrating around sort of the penalty. I think
that was so sad. Even like someone who was, a neutral that doesn't particularly dislike Chelsea, which I know there's not many of them out there, but anyone watching that, just to see his reaction after he missed that penalty, you could just see the frustration, and he was like tearing his shirt off, like just in disbelief that it's happened again. It's hard, and I think most people can kind of see that situation in their own lives when things are not going your way and you just don't know what to do to get out of a slump, and that's where he is at the moment. And it's he's working hard, he's trying, and he's still putting himself in the position to have those shots. Someone with confidence like that, you might not think they wouldn't step up and take a penalty, but he still gets up from the tackle and says, "Yep, I'm going to have this will be mine." Yeah, right, he misses, but he's still trying to get out of it, and he's still doing everything he can. He's putting himself in the right positions, to get chances to get through on goal. And once his confidence turns, then, he's going to be deadly, and he is going to be scoring loads of goals because he's still in those positions.
Do you know what I think I've seen some people on Twitter sort of liken it to sort of Torres, etc. And you sort of go, do you know what? I think it's completely different. If I look at the reasons why his form has dipped so much is, personally, I think Lampard's got to take part of the blame. He's been playing him out of position, and that's not all been on Lampard's fault. It's just that he hasn't had the players on the wings to go and play there, and he's fitted Werner in. And Werner did play that for Red Bull Leipzig, but he played it sort of as a secondary position. It was sort of, you'd switch him in and out rather than starting every week as a left winger. And I think when you're a left winger, you're not there to score as much sort of necessarily. Now he's just sort of struggling to actually hit the barn door, and it's sort of that drop in form. But you can tell his killer instinct is there. I think today we started him in a position that much better suits, where we would get much more value for money. It's frustrating because I think he is a better position there, and he would sort of make us sort of a much better team by playing him there. I just don't think that's what Lampard wants to play. As frustrating that is, that secondary striker is almost what we need. It's sort of, I remember sort of for time of old of that Carroll and Louise for Liverpool, of having sort of a big sort of tall striker and then a sort of poacher or Crouch Defoe. Old school's two-part strikers, maybe something that would work for us in sort of Abraham or Giroud and Werner. But just we're not set up to play in that way yet. But yeah, frustrating for him because you could just tell he just needed that as a confidence booster.
Yeah.
But I see that coming. I don't feel you're going to sort of see that Werner into a spiral and becoming an average player. I just think he needs a bit of time, probably a bit of time to sort of go and lose, where he's like lost fatigue and been playing consistently since sort of joined Chelsea. Ability to break and also an ability to go and play in the position he wants to. And then, as you say, let's get Kepa and go and lose his confidence even further and build his up.
Yeah.
So Luton, great win. We're on to the next round. Let's see how we can sort of continue on the cup run, because to be honest, I feel a cup win would really sort of give the fans a bit of confidence this season.
Well, it looks like we're going to have quite a, I don't want to say easy, but we've got a nice passage into the quarters because we've got Barnsley next round, who earlier on in the season we beat them 6-0 in the League Cup. So hopefully Havertz can get another hat trick. That'd be nice. So I mean, we've put ourselves now in a good position to go on a good run. Obviously, quarterfinals will be a different beast if we get through Barnsley. And hopefully we can turn that into a positive for the season. Arsenal aren't in it anymore, so they can't beat us in the final as they tend to do. So it gives us a good chance.
So we've talked around sort of probably two sort of contradictive games, the Leicester and the Luton, but albeit expected. There's a lot of talk in the media at the moment around Lampard. Will he keep his job? What's really going wrong? Is he going to be able to turn around the season? Now, I wanted to kick off this conversation because I've seen this season, although we're ninth, I feel sort of a month of games, you could still be challenging for the top four. It's not like a runaway season where Liverpool or City are just dominating and are sort of 20 points clear of everyone else. It's a season where Liverpool were on a current run of form, very similar to Chelsea's, but you can see it's temporary. We've had Arsenal who have had sort of a mixed bag. You've had Everton who've gone on a poor run. United at the beginning of the season were sort of potentially going to get rid of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and are now top. City have had a mixed bag where everyone's been beaten by everyone. It's sort of that sort of circle that we saw earlier this week in the Daily Mail where every team has beaten every club in some shape or form. It's the reason you love the Premier League, because anyone can do anything. But I don't feel like it's a season write-off run of form. That's the best sort of answer for us. Does mean that we've got to pull our finger out, but doesn't mean that we're not going to get top four or we're not going to sort of challenge. I think sort of personally with the form and the team that we've got, I don't see us as title challengers anymore, but I don't feel that top four is away from us. The big challenge is whether Lampard has got the ability to go and turn the team round. I think we've discussed in a number of podcasts, you've got an immature manager, which is perfectly fine, but when he's surrounded by an immature back staff, you've got a lot of immature players. It does come to a head. And you've seen the same with Man United. You've seen the same with Arsenal. That run of form can hit you hard, and depends how hard it can really hit. You can see someone like Tottenham where they've brought in Mourinho, his backroom staff, defensive team, and their sort of run of form sort of blip lasted 2 or 3 games, whereas ours seems to be running a lot further. So
that's the big difference, I think, is how quickly you can get out of these slumps. And I mean, to be fair, like you even see, as you said, like Liverpool at the moment, they're in a very bad run of form. I think the problem is we need to get out of the blip now. There's no more chances. I think, lose to Wolves and Arsenal can go above us. That's how bad it's got. Is that how far below us they were in a relegation battle. And they could be above us if we lose and they win this weekend, this midweek. Sorry. So it could get away from us. I think, top 4, I still feel it's quite unlikely at the moment. But we need, if other teams have, blips again and we just maintain a good run of form from now until the end of the season, then potentially we have a chance. But I think that run that we have at the very end of the season, that might be when you see Frank properly under pressure, because we've got some, I think, 4 or 5 really, really tough games to end the season. And if we're not in the top 4 come the end of the season, I think you probably will see him gone. Not that I want him to be, but I think you will see them pull the trigger then.
So where do you think it's gone wrong, and what do you think needs to change? So we've talked around Lampard. I mean, I think sort of a lot of neutral fans forget the season he had last season, sort of not expected to win anything. Yet they're very much ready to sort of remember the amount of money spent this season. And albeit we have spent more in the league, but that if you sort of compound that over 2 seasons, we're pretty much on par with the rest of the top of the league. We've just spent a lot more in a very quick succession. He is in a sort of poor on a form. There is an expectation more this season to sort of top 4 and challenge. How do we change it around? Sort of, we spoke before the podcast around sort of immaturity of the backroom staff. What do you think can change?
Yeah, I think, maybe bringing in an experienced kind of second-hand man, someone to whisper into Lampard's ear, give him a little bit of advice here and there. I saw someone the other day saying potentially you could bring in like Gus Hiddink as an advisor to Lampard, which, that kind of experience is exactly what you need behind the scenes. Someone that's been there, that's done that can give you help and advice when needed. I really don't want to see Lampard out of a job. This is, as a fan, it's kind of what you dream of, one of your former stars coming back and doing the same for you again as a manager. It's just like the perfect situation, but it's just not panning out that way. So things do need to change. Something isn't working and we need to fix it, but it's hard for us to kind of give a verdict on that because we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. We don't know what's causing these issues. All we know is what we see, what's out on the pitch. And that's just lackluster performances that are not kind of cutting it at the moment, especially obviously in the Premier League. I am very concerned about playing Atletico Madrid. That's going to be
back to
an absolute lesson.
Time and Bayern Munich.
See, I don't think it would be Bayern Munich levels because Atletico are more of a, they're very solid defensively and they'll just frustrate the life out of us, but they can then break and kill you on the counter. And, Luis Suarez would love to score against Chelsea.
Yeah, and my big worry is we don't seem to have a good structure at the moment. Defensive back line is still missing the middle two. It was an issue last season. It's an issue this season. We've improved on the wing backs, but you need a solid pair in the middle. We've got a solid keeper, not a great keeper, but someone who can do a job. But unless you've got those two sort of out in front of him, performing every week, maintaining consistency. If you look at sort of all of the top clubs, it's maintaining that consistency in the middle sort of two pairing. You look at sort of John Terry, Carvalho, always came as a pair. You're not switching sort of Carvalho out every week for an alternative defender. You're keeping those two the same because they understand it. You're now asking a very sort of good defender to partner with multiple youngsters that never maintains that sort of consistency. So as we said, sort of Zuma is now out of favour, and we're bringing in Rudiger. We're now bringing in sort of Christensen on occasion, but that's a merry-go-round, and it's because personally I feel Lampard just doesn't understand that defensive piece well enough yet. Middle of the park, we seem to be there and thereabouts, but we seem to just start very negatively. There's no creativity because you either are bringing in Havertz, who is on a poor run of form, and is almost just sort of an extra man that floats, doesn't add much value at the moment. Or we start Kovacic, Kante, Jorginho, and it's just a negative midfield. Wingers, we're sort of struggling to perform, so they are roundabouts every week, and we still haven't got a mainstay and striker. It's an inconsistency that struggles with an ethos that stays within that squad. And Lampard needs to get that right. He's sort of going, I'm going to bet you as my man. I'm going to bet you as the sort of the winning pair, and you're going to play for me. And he has to live and die by those decisions. And at the moment, I don't feel he's got that. He hasn't found it yet. And as an immature manager, he can't commit himself because he's too worried around the decisions he's got to make in that trouble. I think on the run and form that we had before Christmas, we were picking the same squad every game, and you knew it was going to be Zuma, Silva, Chilwell, sort of James, then it was Kante, Kovacic, Mount, and maybe Havertz in that mix, and then it would be sort of Werner, Ziyech, and sort of Giroud or Tammy Abraham. Now you're telling me now I could probably name 3 players or 4 players who would make it every week. No one else.
Yeah, I think it's, obviously he can see that things are not working and he's trying to find the solution, but it's just taking too long, and changing it every time, you're not going to find a solution. You need to give, a couple of games to players and give them a chance to find form. It's not just going to happen. They need to have a few games under their belt, get into the swing of things. That's when you start to find form, but it's not going to happen when you're playing one game, then you're not playing, then you're playing one game, then you're not playing. You can't build that consistency and that form just from playing the odd game here and there. So it's difficult, because when things are not working, you want to make changes to find the right solution, but that's not the way to do it. And it's just it's difficult to see where it's going to end. Hopefully, as an example, today when Tammy got his hat trick, hopefully that's going to say to Lampard, okay, he needs to be starting as a striker. Perhaps that formation, if that's the formation he wants to go into the Wolves game with, then you can play Werner as well. But as a prime example of what I was just saying, you had after the Sevilla game when, we were still flying at that point, he was played Giroud after that for the next few games. And then out of nowhere, even though Giroud had been scoring all the time, he just kind of dropped him. And it wasn't just a rest for one game. He just stopped playing. He didn't play for like the next 2 or 3. And it was kind of like, well, why? He scored every single game. And I understand that's not maybe the way you want to play, but it's winning. You're winning with that. And that's where it's kind of not working.
I feel he's got at the moment. And I think it goes back to the point of having an immature backroom staff.
Yeah.
If I look at sort of United at the moment, we were talking just before the podcast, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has the exact same problem. He's brought in immaturity with Carrick. He's brought in immaturity with a number of other players that he used to play with, sort of Darren Fletcher. But he's also brought in Mike Phelan from sort of the Ferguson age, who can whisper in his ear at the right points to go and say, actually, sort of Pogba has sort of been sort of out in the wild, but you need to bring him back in. And we need to just bet down on someone like a Pogba, who's done absolutely sort of world sort of difference at the moment. Equally defensively, sort of everyone's had those challenges, but we just seem to sort of have that even worse at the moment. And I think it's because the backroom staff have no understanding of defensively. I think you called it at the beginning of the season. It would have been brilliant for him to bring in someone like a JT, who seemed to have turned Aston Villa's defensive troubles around, but just getting them organised. I don't see in our backroom staff an amazing defensive coach. Like, there's probably some great people in the background that you don't see it, but not someone who just sort of goes, pull your finger out your arse and it's going to be these people. That's my worry. But I'm hoping he can turn it around. I don't think you'll see any Chelsea players and Lampard out anytime soon, unless we sort of dropping into sort of the second half of the league for a large sort of proportion of the time. You've got to hope that we make the intelligent choice in bringing someone else in to help him rather than taking him out, because I don't think the options on the table are very good anyway. Thomas Tuchel is a bang average manager that's managed to do well at half decent clubs, but he's not the sort of manager to go and lead a complete transformation. I'm not seeing any managers in the market that could go and do a better job than he's doing at the moment that would be available. I just don't see it happening. So it's going to be a sort of a consistent challenge. We'll keep you updated on our sort of Instagram, Facebook, etc., around any news if anything does change. But let's look forward to the next game. We've got Wolves. I said at the beginning of the podcast, this was really sort of the game that really changed our fortunes last season. We had the sort of the difficult challenge with Everton, but in my eyes, this is where our poor run of form started. I'd love to see it as the end to that poor run of form. Wolves have had a real mixed bag and don't seem to have much of an attacking threat at the moment. And I say that even though pretty much the same squad that beat us last season. or last year. They've lost Jimenez, which has sort of taken a lot of the bite out of what they provide. But equally, they're not in a massive run of form, and that's sort of famous last words, because a lot of clubs seem to turn around their fortunes against us, or sort of continue on a run of form against us. But I feel it's the sort of team we could beat, and we should. I think it'll be very much judged on Lampard's sort of book if he doesn't. So an interesting game for us midweek. And then we've got Burnley, which have always been our bogey team. They always seem to sort of play a frustrating game, a type of football. But what are your thoughts for 2 games this week?
Yeah, I think Wolves is a big game. They've obviously got quality in their side, probably more than you would say Burnley do. But as you said, it was a big part of our misfortune at the beginning of the season when, well, not at the beginning of the season, sorry, only like a month ago, when things started to turn for us. And that's, yeah, it's almost that moment where if you can kind of get one back on them, then that's when you think, oh, actually, we can do this. And the confidence can start to grow. It's beating that gremlin almost. And that's what we really need to push for. I think he needs to really go out and push for an attacking display, and not just go to try and win the game, but go and absolutely annihilate the opposition. That's when you see your form turn. And that's what I'm hoping to see. I really don't know. I can't see our form carrying on being so bad. I really hope it doesn't. So it's got to change at some point. And I really, 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 really hope it's going to be this game. And then on to Burnley, hopefully go into that with confidence. And they're probably flying high with confidence at the moment to beat Liverpool. And they've just beaten Fulham 3-0 in the FA Cup. So they're flying high. And hopefully we can knock them down a peg as well.
Yeah. So I'm not doom and gloom. I think sort of a lot of fans are. I think also there are challenges that overcome, but I don't feel it's impossible to turn it around. And I feel that there is an opportunity for us still to the end of the season of getting something out of this sort of season. Equally, I think there's a number of players that have been written off by the media, that have been written off by a number of sort of fans, etc., or sort of opposition fans, that you'll see as a second season wonder. I think Havertz, what he had to offer at Bayer Leverkusen, absolutely outstanding. I think that's going to come. It's just a matter of him adapting to English football and his home life in England. I think Werner had a great start, and I think that's why people are seeing such a big impact, because he's not scoring. He's in a slump, but he'll be back with a vengeance. I think, personally, I completely agree with you, Jamie. It is finding that person that can help Lampard through a maturity like this, like a time where you are going to get, every manager gets this, where you get sort of a lot of media pressure, a lot of challenge by a number of fans, and how you go and weather that storm and how you go and change around your misfortunes. That, I think, is our biggest win this season. We're not going to bring anyone in January. There's 6 days left, but I just don't see us bringing in anyone in particular. But I also see us potentially changing our fortunes this season too. So we'll keep you guys updated around sort of anything happening with Chelsea, any news around transfers, anything around sort of the Lampard saga and how that may impact anything going on at the club. And we'll look forward to catching up with you next week. You stay classy, Chelsea fans. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification.